Let's unpack the EFF 10th anniversary rally as well as the keynote address by its Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema. I'm joined via Zoom by political analyst Prince Mashele. Prince, appreciate your time this afternoon. Now, many of the things that came out from that address by Julius Malema, he talked about free education. He talked about the LGBTQI community when he said he doesn't agree with Professor Lumumba's viewpoints. He also talked about water and sanitation and many of the challenges that are bedeviling the South African people. Your immediate reaction to that?
Thank you very much for inviting me. Look, it was very clear that the whole celebration was calculated by the leadership of the EFF to launch their election campaign for 2024. The issues that he touched on are the issues that he knows South Africans are concerned about. Yeah. And he was making a promise to South Africans that if voters were to vote the EFF would fix all the problems that he mentioned. The problem, however, is that the EFF has no history and experience of governing. So it is very difficult to believe the promises that Julius Malema was making. He also mentioned, for example, that if the EFF were to be the government of South Africa, they would fix Eskom. He didn't tell South Africans as to how they would do that. If you were to look within the EFF, there are no engineers. They have no experience of fixing anything. So the promises that he made are well and good. But the question is, can they do it? I don't think they can.
But, so Peter, let's analyze this, Prince, I beg your pardon. Let's analyze this and look at the fact that the EFF is now the third largest party in the country, and I think they have 10% of the votes at the last election, if I'm not mistaken. So without that track record that you've spoken about, they've achieved what they've achieved. Doesn't that count for something?
It does. Look, if you look at the EFF as an organization politically, they have grown tremendously and they have sustained themselves over a period of 10 years. If you compare them to other political attempts of the past, such as COPE, such as AHAM, quite clearly the EFF has achieved a lot, and that we must acknowledge. But building an organization internally and sustaining it is one thing. To govern is quite a different thing. They haven't governed. They may have achieved in terms of building an organization, but that doesn't mean that they can fix Eskom.
You're probably right in saying that, but I'm not entirely convinced that the people of South Africa understand that. And one of those reasons is because the people that have a history of governing have failed the people. So what do you do next? But let's move on to our next question and talk about the EFF's leader, Julius Malema. And he's been a prominent figure in South African politics. How has his leadership style and charisma, if you will, influenced the party's growth and certainly appealed to its supporters?
Look, Julius Malema is a larger-than-life character in the EFF and in South Africa. There is no question that if you were to remove him from the EFF, the party would almost immediately crumble. He is the most charismatic leader in that party. He is the center of attraction politically. There is no question about it. The whole party hangs on him. And he needs to be given credit. I mean, he's relatively young, and he managed to convince many South Africans to join the party and to support it. I mean, the fact that today they were able to fill up the FNB stadium is not a small feat. There are very few organizations that can do that. I mean, it's the ANC that has done that in the past. So yes, Julius Malema is a very important figure in South African politics, but quite clearly, the whole EFF hangs on him and his charisma.
So, in your view, what does he need to do to ensure that there is life after Julius Malema in the EFF? Because I'd imagine that it's not about just his leadership, it's about taking the party forward.
Well, he still has time on his side in the sense that he is relatively young. I actually don't foresee him resigning from the top leadership of the party over the next 10 to 15 years. I think he will remain the leader of the party for a very long time. Hopefully in the process, other younger leaders will emerge that in time will replace him. But he is going to remain at the center, at the top of the party for a very, very long time. I mean, he's a very dictatorial leader, by the way. So he will decide at some point to step aside. But that will happen when he's very old. I don't expect that to happen anytime soon.
Now, you speak about him being a dictatorial leader. Is this a key trait of young parties? Is this a way that you keep everyone together until you've achieved what you need to achieve? In fact, the absence of some form of democracy, if you will.
Look, Julius Malema's dictatorship in the party is a very important element in keeping the party together. I have no doubt that other parties such as the ANC would have wanted to see the EFF dead as in yesterday. So attempts will always be made to destabilize and dissolve the EFF. So Julius Malema is aware of that. Remember, he was in the ANC when the ANC plotted to destabilize and disintegrate COPE. So he knows how parties are destroyed, which is why he has decided to be firm and dictatorial in his leadership. So in a way, by the way, although when we speak of dictatorship, we normally speak of it in negative terms. Dictatorship in the context of the EFF is very important to hold the party together.
Now, I want to touch on something, and that's the presence of a few leaders from opposition movements. UDM leader Bantu Holomisa was there. ATM leader Vuyo Zungula had a moment to speak. We also heard from the Congress of Traditional Leaders chief who spoke, and what he said was that Julius Malema has taken responsibility of a vibrant parliament. What do you read into their presence and certainly the impact that Julius Malema and the EFF have had on a parliament?
Look, firstly, the leaders who were there, leading political leaders of other political parties, by the way, are non-entities in South African politics. They are not leading any big organizations. UDM is pretty much a one-man show. There was also the PAC there, which is almost non-existent. So the leaders of more significant political parties, such as the IFP, DA, and so on, were not there, and that's very clear. But it is true that the EFF under Julius Malema have disrupted the way our politics had been flowing before. I mean, they have introduced, not in my view, vibrancy. They have actually introduced chaos in parliament. I mean, we remember the chaotic scenes of bottles flying and security being called into the house. And the fact that they go into parliament wearing overalls, it's something new. So if you were to ask me, they have actually disrupted our political culture and they have introduced a very dangerous element. So the idea that you can be violent, you can jump on tables in parliament was never heard of before the EFF came into the political scene. So that is the major contribution that they have made to our politics. Substantively, by the way, I actually cannot find something that they have introduced to Parliament in terms of enriching debate. No, they have introduced chaos in my view.
Okay, and finally, Prince, Julius Malema has postured himself, or certainly the EFF, as the next rulers of South Africa come 2024. What's your take on that statement? I mean, it is very, very bold. Is it just politicking?
He is politicking. He knows himself. There is no poll conducted by anybody, including by the EFF, that suggests that the EFF is going to be the governing party of South Africa come 2024. There is nothing like that. It's not going to happen. What could possibly happen is a coalition government between the EFF and the ANC. That is not far-fetched, because most polls, by the way, suggest that the ANC will not clinch 50% of the vote next year. So the ANC, if it were to come back as a governing party, it would have to find a coalition partner. And the EFF is one such potential partner. So they could possibly be part of the governing mix, but not as a majority party, certainly.
Prince Mashele, political analyst, appreciate your time this afternoon unpacking for us that keynote address by Julius Malema.